My parents were deeply in love, or so it seemed in the beginning. Their love story was the talk of the town when they got married. My father was a handsome and hardworking man, and my mother, a beautiful and kind-hearted woman. They seemed like the perfect couple, and everyone believed they were destined for happiness. In the first year of their marriage, they were blessed with their first child, a baby girl. My father was overjoyed. He showered my mother and their baby with gifts and love. He was so proud, cradling the tiny girl in his arms and boasting to everyone about how beautiful his daughter was. Life felt like a dream, and my mother was content, believing she had married the best man in the world. But as years went by, the narrative began to shift. By the 8th year of their marriage, my parents had welcomed 3 more children, all girls. Now they had 4 daughters. While my father continued to love his daughters, his behavior toward my mother began to change subtly. It started with small remarks, an offhand comment here and there about how it would be nice to have a son. Then the pressure began to build from his family. My grandmother, my father's mother, was the first to voice her dissatisfaction. "A woman's worth is in the son she gives her husband," she would say. "What good is a wife who can't secure the family name?" My mother, patient as she was, tried to explain to her mother-in-law that the gender of a child is determined by the father. "It's the chromosomes your son contributes that determine whether the baby is a boy or a girl," she explained gently. But my grandmother wasn't having it. "Nonsense. My son is a real man. He deposits male seeds. It's your body that's destroying them," she spat, her words cutting like knives. The situation grew worse when my aunts, my father's sisters, joined in. They insulted and humiliated my mother every chance they got. "You're nothing but a baby factory for girls," one of them sneered. "Why don't you make yourself useful and produce a son for once?" When words weren't enough, they resorted to physical violence. They hit my mother, pulling at her hair and slapping her face. Despite this, my mother stood her ground. "You're women too," she would say. "What will you do if you're treated this way in your own marriages?" But her words fell on deaf ears. Their hatred for her only grew, fueled by their twisted belief that she was a failure. My father, who once adored my mother and cherished her as the love of his life, began to change. My father's friends mocked him during their meetings. They called him unmanly and reminded him that a real man has sons to carry on his legacy. These taunts wounded his pride deeply. He began coming home in a foul mood, lashing out at my mother. "Why can't you be like other women?" he would shout. "Look at so-and-so. She has given her husband 3 sons. What have you given me? Just girls." My mother bore it all in silence. She tried to stay strong for her daughters, but the weight of the insults and the lack of support from her husband wore her down. In her darkest moments, my mother found solace in a friend who was facing a similar plight. This friend had 3 daughters and understood the pain of being judged for something beyond her control. They would meet often, sharing their struggles and offering each other comfort. One day my mother's friend called with joyous news she'd given birth to a son. My mother was genuinely happy for her, but couldn't stop the tears that flowed as she held the baby boy in her arms. She couldn't help but wish that she, too, could give her husband a son. Her friend encouraged her to try again. "Don't give up," she said. "Maybe the next one will be a boy." Despite knowing the toll each pregnancy took on her body, my mother decided to try one last time. She prayed fervently throughout the pregnancy, clinging to the hope that this time she would give birth to a son. Months later, the big day arrived. My mother went into labor, and to everyone's surprise, she gave birth to triplets, 3 healthy, beautiful baby girls. When she saw their tiny faces, she felt a mixture of joy and sadness. She was overjoyed that her babies were healthy, but heartbroken, knowing what awaited her at home. When the news reached my father, he was furious. He didn't even come to the hospital to see my mother or the babies. Instead, my grandmother and aunts showed up with my siblings and my mother's belongings. They handed her divorce papers, forcing her to sign them on the spot. "We don't need you anymore," my grandmother said coldly. You and your daughters are a burden to this family. They abandoned my mother and her 7 children at the hospital. My mother was devastated. She had no family to turn to, no one to help her. The hospital bills piled up and she sank into despair. She felt as though the world had turned its back on her. But just when she thought all hope was lost, help came in the form of a government initiative for abandoned mothers and children. They paid the hospital bills, provided scholarships for my siblings and me, and gave my mother a grant to start a business. Determined to provide for her children, my mother poured her heart into building her business. She worked tirelessly, day and night, and her efforts paid off. Her business flourished, and she expanded it to other cities. In time, she became a wealthy and respected woman in society. She ensured that my sisters and I received the best education possible. We graduated and excelled in our respective careers, making her proud. Meanwhile, my father's family encouraged him to remarry, hoping the new wife would bear him sons. He remarried, full of hope. But his dreams were shattered when his new wife gave birth to 2 daughters. Unlike my mother, she was lazy and materialistic, more interested in spending his money than building a family. One day, as my father drove home from work, lost in thought about his predicament and regrets, he failed to see a curve in the road. He lost control of the car and crashed. He woke up in the hospital, paralyzed. My father unable to work and provide, his new wife became unwilling to care for him. She packed up all their valuables and abandoned him with their 2 little daughters. My father was left alone, broken and helpless. Hearing about my mother's success, my father and his family came knocking on our door. They begged for forgiveness and assistance. My mother listened silently as they poured out their regrets. When they finished, she spoke with calm authority. Forgiveness isn't something you ask for when you've run out of options. It's something you earn through humility and change. I've already forgiven myself for believing I was less than enough, and that was the only forgiveness I truly needed. You made your choice, she said, and so did I. I won't let my daughters grow up thinking it's their job to forgive men who devalue them. You taught me that some bridges are better left burned. She did not let them in. Instead of taking them back into her life, my mother chose to break the cycle of pain they had inflicted. She supported my father's daughters with his second wife from a distance, ensuring they had access to education and opportunities. She didn't want them to inherit the bitterness of their family's choices. But for my father and his mother and sisters, she maintained her boundaries. Sometimes leaving people behind is the most loving thing you can do for yourself, she said. In his final days, my father sent a letter to my mother. In it, he wrote, I spent my life chasing what I thought mattered, only to lose what truly did. You were the strongest person I ever knew, and I didn't see it until it was too late. Thank you for being the person I couldn't be. My mother read the letter, but did not respond. She had already moved on, her heart healed and her life full. When he passed away, we didn't attend his funeral, not out of spite, but because we had moved beyond the need for closure. He had become a lesson, not a wound. On her 75th birthday, my mother sat surrounded by her daughters and grandchildren. As the party buzzed with laughter and love, someone asked her what advice she would give to others. She smiled and said, Life will test you in ways you never imagined, but the secret is this. Every storm passes, and when it does, you decide what kind of person you'll be when the sun comes out. Don't live for anyone else's approval. Live for the version of yourself you're proud to see in the mirror. Her words resonated deeply, leaving everyone in awe of her strength. To everyone watching, I want to remind you that no matter where you are in life, you are capable of achieving greatness. The journey may not always be easy, and there may be moments when you feel defeated, but those moments don't define you. They are simply stepping stones on your path to something greater. Never underestimate the power of your own strength. The challenges you face are not roadblocks, but opportunities for you to prove to yourself just how resilient, courageous, and determined you truly are. Every time you get knocked down, you have the power to rise again, stronger, wiser, and more focused than before. Believe in yourself, even when the world doubts you. Trust that you are exactly where you need to be, and the hard work and persistence will pay off. You have everything within you to turn your dreams into reality, no matter how impossible they may seem right now. Keep going, keep striving, keep believing. The best is yet to come, and you are more than capable of making it happen. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more.